The most important takeaway from this week should be that when they talk about jobs for Americans, they specifically mean the low skill, low wage jobs. They want you as Americans fighting over the scraps. That's why you see all the people in charge and at the top of the party supportive of H-1B visas for high skilled workers. And the reason for this is very simple. Capitalism. While we're on the subject of and teetering on the edge of class consciousness, I really want those of you who are surprised to understand this. The only reason a bunch of immigrants and first-gen Americans stoked the flames and fire of xenophobia and racism is because it was very, very convenient for them and very useful. In the same way, by the way, that certain people on the right only just discovered that free speech absolutists are only free speech absolutists when it's convenient for them. Now, obviously, there is real racism and xenophobia there, but it also just benefits them greatly to encourage it a hell of a lot more among the rest of you, because it keeps you focusing on that rather than them. The reason H-1B visas and just immigrants in general are every capitalist's dream is that immigrants are so much easier to exploit. If your employment is directly tied to your ability to stay in a country, you are going to put up with a hell of a lot more and accept getting paid a hell of a lot less in exchange. It's not actually a question of skill, because most of these H-1B visa holders are actually being educated in the United States, just like millions more Americans, but it's about what they kept referring to as motivation. Motivation. That just means that they're easier to take advantage of. That is what you should understand when they're saying that. They are more motivated to put up with not okay things. And this shouldn't be a foreign concept, no pun intended, to any American, right? Because we have the exact same thing with healthcare. It's why we don't have universal healthcare in this country. It makes us so much easier to exploit when our healthcare is tied to our employer. It makes it a hell of a lot more risky to quit a job that is treating us poorly or not paying us enough. It makes it a hell of a lot more risky for us to lose a job, for us to put up a fight when something is not okay. And that, by the way, is also why the lower Americans' wages are, the easier they are to exploit. You can't just deport Americans, right? In theory. But the more unaffordable life is for Americans, the more they're grateful to have the lowest paying job that America has to offer with the worst benefits, the more desperate they are to keep that job and afraid, the easier it is to take advantage of them. The less ability they have to negotiate better wages, better working conditions, better hours. And ultimately, the more that they convince you that all of this stress, all of this strife and unaffordability is because of someone who was born in a different place than you, who looks different from you, and not them, the easier it is for them to take more and more advantage of you. And just to be crystal clear, the problem is not H-1B visa holders or immigrants, but it should be obvious by now that they don't have yours or anyone's best interests at heart. They're just worried about their bottom line, and they're gonna pit you against other people as much as possible to make you as desperate as possible. Also, ironically, the more tenuous you help them make an immigrant status, the more exploitable that immigrant will be and the cheaper they will be. But not only have they convinced you that giving them more unregulated power, that not raising the minimum wage, that giving them more money all somehow benefits you, they've also convinced you to let them raise the prices of everything, so that everything becomes more unaffordable to you under the guise of bringing jobs to America. They want you convinced that any law that benefits you is bad as long as it also benefits anyone else. But they want you to forget that any law that harms other people is probably in the long run also harming you too. They just want to squeeze you. You think they care about your xenophobia outside of giving them a convenient excuse to round up a bunch of migrants and use the 13th Amendment on them? You've been played.